Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So before we begin, let's look at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 11 important articles. Today's newspaper contains a number of topics which are very important for our prelims and mains examination. So let's cover all these 11 articles in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, I was going through the comments. Many of you were asking as to why we didn't conduct the Hindu analysis yesterday on the 1st of May. Please note that 1st of May being a public holiday on the account of Labor Day, we did not bring out the Hindu analysis yesterday. So today's newspaper discussion would be comprehensive and will ensure that some of the related articles which were there in yesterday's paper will also be brought into the discussion as part of today's The Hindu News analysis. So let's get started. But before that, a couple of important announcements. For those of you who want the PDF of this session, please join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code. After the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. Then apart from that, there's a very important announcement for those who are preparing for 2026 and beyond. Right now, Unacademy's courses are available at the lowest price ever. At just 17,999, you can get a 12-month subscription for our online IAS classroom program. This will give you access to all our live and recorded lectures, the test series, the study material, doubt resolution sessions, and mentorship sessions as well. You also stand a chance to get up to 12 months of free extension. So this is a limited period offer. Do avail this, and the link is provided in the video description. Now, on the subscription page, you might see a different price. But to avail this massive discount, you have to enter the code IAS English. Please make a note of this. Enter the code IAS English to avail this discounted price. With this, let's get started and look at the editorials first. Today, both the editorials are important. So let's start with the first editorial on page number 8 that deals with the topic of caste census. So first, let's understand why caste census is in the news. And I will go beyond this article in the Hindu. I'll be taking some references from the Indian Express, the print, and as well as from Hindustan Times, so that I can provide you a elaborate, comprehensive discussion on this very important topic. Because just the other day, the government of India has announced that in the upcoming caste census, in the upcoming census exercise, caste census would be an integral part of it, which means for the first time ever post independence, India would be carrying out caste enumeration as part of the census exercise. So, why is this important? And what is the relevance of this? What could be the impact, the consequences? That is what we have to learn and understand today. This decision was made by the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, which is chaired by the Prime Minister and consists of several top cabinet ministers. It's such a high profile cabinet committee that it's often referred to as a super cabinet, as it decides upon important issues related to center state relations, important political and economic affairs of the country, sometimes even including the foreign policy and security affairs of the country. So, this very critical cabinet committee has approved the inclusion of caste census in the upcoming census exercise, which is likely to be conducted next year in 2026. Now, let's talk about the history of caste census first. Has caste census been ever conducted in the country? Let's look at this first, and then we'll understand the relevance, the application of a caste census, why is it necessary from a policy making perspective, and what are the risks associated with it. And we'll also discuss the political nature of this decision, because eventually this decision will have serious electoral implications as well. So, a caste census essentially is conducted to determine the caste profile of the country, to determine the different castes, the population size of different caste based communities in India. So, caste census was conducted once. But before I come to that, if you look at post independent India, Since 1951, the decennial census which has been conducted, it has always collected data only for specific communities such as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and religion based denominations. So, when the caste enumerators, or usually trained teachers from the government schools, when they come out with a questionnaire and ask these questions in order to collect the required data for the census, questions related to whether you belong to SC/ST community and what is your religion are part of the caste. They are part of the census questionnaire, which has been a regular feature of the census exercise. But however, as I told you before, post independence, post 1947, India has never ever conducted a dedicated, specific caste census. The last caste census was done in colonial India, in pre independent India in 1931, the data of which was made public, and it actually had serious political and social consequences. So, this is the last available caste data for the country, the census of 1931, which was carried out under British rule. It was done in 1941 as well during the World War period. But however, this data was never released publicly. So, why is caste data relevant? Especially to provide for reservation, to provide for affirmative action, be it reservation in education in government schools, or be it for reservation in public employment, which is constitutionally provided under Article 15 and Article 16. I'm sure you know that Article 15 and 16, they provide for affirmative action to provide reservation for the backward classes, the socially, educationally backward classes. So they can be provided reservation to increase their representation in education. And similarly, Article 16 provides for reservation in public employment for those classes which are underrepresented in the government services. So with caste data, you can provide for better targeting of reservation, ensure that specific communities which are the most backward can be provided with the benefits of affirmative action. But at the same time, this tool could be misused for political electoral gains as well. In recent months, you might remember several political parties have been raising a demand for caste census. The ruling BJP at the center had long opposed it. But now it appears that the central government has made a U turn, a complete U turn on its policy. And now the government is promising that a caste census will be conducted in the upcoming census. Now, if you look at one of the exercises which was carried out during the 2011 census, the socio-economic caste census. This was one exercise which was done under the then UPA government under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. When the 2011 census was approaching, then Law Minister Veerapumaili had written to then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, urging that a caste census has to be carried out, determine the socio-economic backwardness of the other backward classes in the country. So the government of India had carried out a SECC, socio-economic caste census, in parallel to the 2011 census. The data was collected in 2011. By 2012, the data was collated, but this data was never fully made public. In 2016, the data from socio-economic caste census was published by the Ministry of Rural Development and Ministry of Urban Development, but only partial data was published. Only some of the socio-economic indicators were published, but the caste-specific population data and the backwardness related indicators, they were not published by the government. Given the sensitivity associated with it and the electoral implications of that, the data was withheld by the government and only partial data was released. The raw caste data which had been collected, this was handed over to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, which set up an expert committee under then Niti Aayog Vice Chairman Arvind Panagria for further categorization and classification. But this raw caste data and the further inferences which have been drawn from that has never been released publicly. That's why I told you, post independence, we have never conducted a full fledged caste census exercise. It was done partially to look at the socio-economic indicators in 2011-12, but the data was never fully made public. So, right now, there has been a political push by various parties at the regional level and also at the national level to conduct a caste census exercise. You might have seen Regional parties in UP, Bihar, in Karnataka, and many other parts of the country. They have been pushing for it, and many state governments have carried out their own caste census exercise. Recently, the government of Karnataka has published caste census data based on its own survey. Bihar also has brought out such data. And based on that, they are looking to provide targeted benefits of reservation. And this helps in subcategorization. When it comes to reservation, one of the hotly debated topic today is subcategorization. Because in different communities, even within SCs and STs, a few specific communities have drawn the benefits of reservation, creating a creamy layer within the backward classes, leaving behind the rest. The benefits of affirmative action has largely benefited few communities, even within the backward categories. This is largely due to the political manipulation of castes and utilizing caste based voting in order to influence elections. That's what our political parties have done, not just the regional parties, even the national level parties, from the Congress to the BJP to the left. Every single party in the country has played with caste politics in order to reap electoral gains. Trying to please a certain vote bank is a sure shot way to win elections in the country, particularly on the lines of caste. By promising more reservation, by promising more benefits to certain castes, to certain communities, it has become a proven way for various parties to win elections after elections. This is where the challenge and the concern comes up. Will caste census data be misused? Will it be misused for electoral gains? If you look at the trend after the Lok Sabha 2024 elections, clearly those parties which spoke about caste census have made a better electoral progress. If you look at, let's say, Congress and few regional parties which were demanding a caste census, they saw a significant improvement in their electoral performance. Whereas the BJP, which has opposed caste census previously, it saw a slight decline in its performance. So these electoral calculations obviously has played a role in the decision behind the government of India's call to include caste census in the upcoming census exercise. So no party is free from the electoral calculations. And essentially, they are looking to use this to provide for targeted benefits of reservation. Now, this can work both ways. Because, see, for policy making, for governance, for administration, you always need accurate data. Without accurate data on your population, on the profile of your population, the size, the distribution of your population, and other various socioeconomic indicators, you can never really implement government schemes and government welfare programs. They won't be effective. So, census data serves a very crucial purpose with regard to efficiency in governance and administration. So, caste census data, if it is used correctly with a good intention, it can be great for affirmative action. It can be used for subcategorization and ensure those communities within SC, ST category, within OBC category, who have been left out from the benefits of reservation, they can be specifically targeted with the benefits. Even the benefits of other welfare schemes given to backward classes could also be better targeted. But if it is misused for political reasons, for electoral gains, to create vote banks, it could become a powerful tool in the hands of the ruling parties in particular, creating a big disadvantage for the opposition. So, this has serious implications for democratic elections, free and fair elections as well. That is the concern that experts are expressing. But as we have seen, the government is going to push through the caste census exercise, which is going to begin likely next year by 2026. Because, see, already the census exercise has been delayed for a long time. It should have been done in 2021. By then, the census exercise should have been completed and the data should have come out by end of 2021 or early 2022. This did not happen because of the disruption caused by the pandemic, and the Modi government kept on delaying and pushing the exercise. And there has been a lot of speculation regarding why there has been such a long delay. It has been linked with the delimitation, because delimitation of Lok Sabha and Assembly constituencies was frozen since 1971. And the next delimitation would be based on the census data conducted post 2026. So, right now, we have seen the Women's Reservation Bill also being passed in the Parliament, which also requires delimitation to be carried out. And census data will be crucial here as well to draw up the boundaries of these reserved constituencies for women candidates. So the upcoming census exercise is of pivotal significance, not just for policy making, not just for governance, but for elections, but for the very future of Indian democracy and the complex interplay which is present in the Indian society. And now, given that caste census would also be a part of it, it's going to be all the more significant. So the editorial is hoping that the ruling parties and the opposition don't unnecessarily politicize this. Because as I said, if it is used appropriately, it can be an effective tool for governance. It can provide for better targeted delivery of welfare schemes and programs and the policy of reservation. It can uplift the downtrodden backward communities which have not been touched by the benefits of reservation. But if misused, it can have very serious and even deadly consequences. Because there are few opposition leaders already calling for removing the 50% cap on reservation, which was laid down by the Supreme Court in the Indra Savni judgment. There are few states which have already breached the 50% cap in reservation. So, if reservation continues on this path, then there won't be any opportunities left for the general category. That could have a adverse impact as well. So that is why caste census is a highly contentious, debatable topic. Now, the ruling BJP, which was apparently opposed to it, has now made a complete U turn and it has said it is going to conduct a caste census along with the upcoming census exercise. So please take up a practice question based on what we have discussed. The politics of it may not be too relevant for the exam, but the implications, the pros and cons of a caste census can be very, very important. So please take up this question for your answer writing practice. Next, on the same page, we have another editorial related to India's approach towards targeting and isolating Pakistan. In the aftermath of the brutal Pahalgam terror attack, India has unleashed force of diplomacy again, targeting Pakistan in order to isolate the country. There are reports that India might be considering some sort of military response as well to dismantle the terror infrastructure in Pakistan and to deter Pakistan from sponsoring terrorism against India. But though those reports and rumors are present, India has already displayed force of diplomacy against Pakistan to try and isolate the country. And this is not the first time India is doing it. We have done it repeatedly since the 2611 attacks. Since the 2011 Mumbai attacks, the 2008 Mumbai attacks, the 2611 attacks, India has engaged in course of diplomacy to target and isolate Pakistan internationally. To point out that Pakistan is a country, a rogue state that sponsors terrorism, that is deeply enmeshed with non state actors, including terror groups, to wage a covert proxy war against India. Even after the Uri attacks and Pulwama attacks, the Modi government as well engaged in course of diplomacy, isolating Pakistan by adopting the SARC minus Pakistan strategy, where we sidelined the SARC organization itself and we ensured that Pakistan was cornered in South Asia and we have brought tremendous pressure on Pakistan. We have used platforms like United Nations, FATF, and as well as the 1267 Sanctions Committee of UN Security Council to bring international pressure on Pakistan and to isolate the country. The Western powers, particularly US and European powers, which historically were aligned with Pakistan, even they have shown a shift over the last 2 decades, more in favor of India, at least when it comes to counterterrorism. And they have often supported India's efforts to target Pakistan and to ensure that Pakistan is held accountable for its involvement with terrorist activities. But however, one challenge for India has been some of the close allies of Pakistan. A few close allies, such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Taliban, for example, in Afghanistan. So some of these allies of Pakistan, they have often stood with Pakistan at least until 2008, 2009. But in the last 15 years, we have seen a major shift happening in West Asian geopolitics, where Saudi Arabia and UAE shifted their foreign policy approach towards India and Pakistan. And more recently, in the last 3 years, in Afghanistan, the Taliban, which has come back to power, has shown a big shift towards the approach with India. And India also has reached out to the Taliban. And India has managed to ensure that these traditional allies of Pakistan are no longer aligned with Pakistan. So, this isolation of Pakistan within the Islamic world, within West Asia region and amongst the Muslim countries is something that is very, very significant. This is one of the most important foreign policy achievements of India, of both the Modi government and the previous Manmohan Singh government. It's a testament to India's course of diplomatic strategy against Pakistan. We've not only isolated Pakistan internationally at global platforms with the help of Western powers, but even amongst the traditional allies of Pakistan, we've been able to isolate the country. So let's understand how India has managed to do this, what developments have taken place. So let's start with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, which is one of the most important regional powers in West Asia, is seen as a leader of the Sunni power bloc. And Saudi Arabia has traditionally aligned with Pakistan, stood with Pakistan. Saudi Arabia has given a lot of funds and investments to Pakistan. Even today, Pakistani economy is dependent on Saudi funds and Saudi investments. It's even believed that Saudi Arabia has seen Pakistan's nuclear program as an insurance, as a possible security cover. It is also said that Saudi Arabia has been involved in funding radicalism by sponsoring radical madrasas in Pakistan and Afghanistan. When US and Pakistan aligned in 1979 to raise the Afghan Mujahideen as a resistance force against the Soviet occupation, it was said that even Saudi was involved in this covert war, where Saudi Arabia provided funds for radical madrasas to promote radicalization in the Afghanistan-Pakistan belt. And Saudi Arabian regime, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is known to be involved with various terrorist entities as well, from Al Qaeda to Taliban to many other terrorist organizations across the world. And traditionally, Saudi Arabia has stood with Pakistan on important issues like Kashmir, or be it Pakistan sponsored terrorism. And this was the case until 2008 2009. For example, if Pakistan tried to internationalize the Kashmir issue by bringing it at the United Nations or platforms like Organization of Islamic Cooperation, countries like Saudi Arabia, they would vote in support of Pakistan. They would vote against India because they saw India as just a buyer of their oil. They saw this as a buyer-seller relationship. They did not see India as a strategic partner. So the year 2007 was actually a turning point for India-Saudi relations as we elevated this relationship through the Delhi Declaration when the then king of Saudi Arabia visited India under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's administration, and we signed a historic agreement elevating the partnership to the strategic level. But the turning point came post 26/11 attacks. The Mumbai attack was a turning point. Since Lashkar-e-Toiba targeted American and European citizens, US and Europe finally changed their approach towards India and Pakistan and started aligning more closely with India with regard to counterterrorism. They realized that they couldn't trust Pakistan entirely. And there was a subtle Western pressure on Saudi Arabia to work closely with India, to assist India in counterterrorism. Because Saudi Arabia and some West Asian countries had been turned into a safe haven by Pakistan's ISI to support, nurture, and cultivate terrorist groups against India. There were several terrorists hiding in countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE. There were several sleeper modules operating in West Asian countries, and these governments wouldn't act against them. With subtle pressure from Western countries and improved relations between India and some of these powers, their approach towards India changed. Their approach towards Pakistan and terrorism changed. So Saudi Arabia started collaborating with India in the field of counterterrorism, intelligence sharing. In 2010, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh carried out a historic visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, met the King, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia as well, and we signed the historic Riyadh Declaration, which transformed our ties with this country. Saudi Arabia saw India as a key strategic partner. India was a rising economy, and Saudi Arabia wanted to invest in a good destination like India. Since these oil monarchies were sitting on massive piles of petrodollars, which they had earned by selling their reserves, their oil and gas reserves, they wanted good investment destinations for their investments. India appeared to be a lucrative opportunity, and India was seen as a lucrative consumer market. So there was a win-win situation for both the sides, for India and Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia adopted a pivot in its policy and made a strategic shift, and it no longer backs Pakistan on Kashmir or terrorism like it used to before. On the issue of Kashmir, Saudi Arabia has started abstaining on these votes. If Pakistan tries to bring the issue at UN or OIC, Saudi Arabia has been abstaining from these votes, clearly signaling a shift towards India, which essentially means Saudi Arabia doesn't want to interfere. It wants India Pakistan to handle it bilaterally. And that is a big win for India. Then Saudi Arabia has even condemned acts of terrorism after Uri attacks, after Pulwama, and after Pahalgam. Saudi Arabia has openly condemned these attacks. Don't forget, when the Pahalgam attack happened, Prime Minister Modi was carrying out a very important visit to Saudi Arabia. He was in Jeddah meeting Crown Prince MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And the Saudi regime was categorically critical of the terrorist attack and stood with India, backed India's efforts against fighting terrorism. This shift, which we have seen, is very, very critical. They're no longer backing Pakistan on Kashmir or terrorism. If you take, for example, in 2010 to 2012 period, India was hunting few terrorists hiding in these countries who were backed by Pakistan. One of the terrorists, Abu Jundal, was involved in the 26/11 Mumbai attacks, was hiding in West Asia, in Saudi Arabia to be specific. He was one of the handlers of the Mumbai attacks. When India raised this issue with Saudi Arabia following the Riyadh Declaration, Saudi Arabia fully cooperated with India, assisted the Indian intelligence and law enforcement agencies to detain Abu Jundal and extradited him to India to face justice in the country. So counter-terror cooperation has improved. Defense cooperation has gone up. Military exercises are being conducted today between India and Saudi. Both countries are setting up a $100 billion fund with Saudi investment to focus on technology, innovation, startups, research and development. That is how the relationship has transformed between India and Saudi, whereas Pakistan has been isolated. The same story holds with UAE as well, because UAE often follows the policy approach of Saudi Arabia. UAE has always been a close ally and supporter of Pakistan, but we see a major shift happen in the policy of UAE post 2010. Again, the Mumbai attacks was a turning point. The subtle Western pressure on these countries to work with India. And also, they saw India as a very lucrative market, as an investment destination. They realized India is a strategic partner. So, UAE shifted its policy as well. In 2017, India UAE elevated the relationship to the strategic partnership level with close relations in counterterrorism, defense, intelligence sharing, and we have important military exercises as well with each other today. We have joint defense projects that are going on. We are collaborating in the field of space, nuclear energy, artificial intelligence. India's UPI has been extended to UAE. UAE is one of India's largest trading partner. If you take all the trading partners of India, just the countries, excluding European Union, UAE happens to be the third largest trading partner of India and one of the biggest investors in India. We have signed a free trade agreement. A comprehensive economic cooperation agreement was signed recently in 2022, which has already become operational. So the ties have really transformed between the two countries, and UAE played a critical role in helping India to detain several Lashkar and Indian Mujahideen terrorists who are operating in the country with the help of Pakistan. Now, this is a big shift because let's say in 1990s, early 2000, UAE would never support India like this. On the issue of Kashmir, UAE would always vote against India to support Pakistan, but now they are completely neutral on this. They abstain from these votes. After India revoked the special status of J&K under Article 370, and Pakistan and China tried to bring it at United Nations, countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia abstained from those votes, calling it an internal matter of India. When Pakistan tried to raise the anti-CAA protests at the UN and OIC, even then, UAE, Saudi Arabia, both of them abstained from those votes, calling it an internal matter of India. In 1990s, if you remember, when India was pursuing Dawood Ibrahim, was sheltered in Sharjah, attending cricket matches as well at Sharjah, roaming around in Dubai. India urged UAE to arrest him, detain him, and extradite him, but UAE authorities refused. In 1999, when the IC-814 hijacking took place, and when the hijacked aircraft landed in Dubai, India requested assistance from the UAE authorities to negotiate with the hijackers to buy some time so that UAE could allow a possible Indian operation led by Indian commandos. But UAE refused any such intervention from India. UAE even refused to negotiate with the hijackers, only providing basic support and securing the lives of some hostages before it asked the aircraft to leave, which then headed towards Afghanistan. So this is how the relations were at one point. But today, UAE and Saudi Arabia are key counterterrorism partners for India. If India could decimate Indian Mujahideen, the sleeper cells of Lashkar in West Asia, the support from UAE and Saudi Arabia was critical in intelligence operations. So this is the big shift which we have seen in the Islamic world, and Pakistan stands isolated today. But the biggest achievement has to be what's happening in Afghanistan. The Taliban, which came to power in 2021, was always seen as a puppet of the Pakistani deep state, of Pakistan's army and its intelligence agency. Because that's how the Taliban regime was, where it captured power for the first time in 1996. During this period, from 1996 to 2001, the Taliban regime was a nightmare for India, as Pakistan used that strategic depth to cultivate anti India terror groups on Afghan soil to target India. Pakistan created linkages between Al Qaeda and Lashkar, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, and all these groups were sheltered and backed by the Taliban regime. So India had declared Taliban itself as a terrorist entity, cut off all ties. But today we have seen a complete transformation. This time when Taliban came back to power, both sides have reached out to each other, and recently India has stepped up high-level engagement with the Taliban regime. Just few weeks ago, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri met with Taliban's foreign minister in Dubai. And more recently, just few days ago, one of India's senior diplomats in the Ministry of External Affairs, who is responsible for the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran division, went to Kabul, met with Afghan's Foreign Minister Mutaki, and held a very, very important dialogue. And don't forget, this comes at a time when Pakistan's relations with Taliban has been ruptured. They were allies at one point, but today the Taliban regime hates the deep state of Pakistan. Pakistan has blamed Taliban for backing the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is the Pakistan faction of Taliban, which has been targeting the Pakistani deep state. And Pakistan has retaliated against the TTP, carrying out military strikes on Afghan territory, Afghan soil. Obviously, is not liked by the Afghan Taliban regime. Afghan Taliban looks at Pakistan Taliban as their brother organization, as they're all made up of the Pashtun community. So Pakistan has conducted these military strikes on Afghan territory, which violates the sovereignty of the Afghan regime, and Taliban doesn't like this. Pakistan has started deporting Afghan refugees, which has not been appreciated by the Taliban regime. So relations today between the Pakistani army and Taliban, the ISI and the Taliban, is at its lowest point. And at the right juncture, India is building those relations with Taliban to protect our interests, to ensure Taliban doesn't allow Afghan soil and territory to be used against India. This is a big win for India. After the Pahalgam attack, Taliban issued a statement. I know it's ironic for a equally radical group to issue a statement condemning an act of terrorism inspired by religious fundamentalism. But the very fact that Taliban did that, criticized the Pahalgam attack and stood with India, is a big win for India, as it isolates Pakistan from all its traditional allies in the Islamic world. So today Pakistan is left with very few allies. China, of course, has always been a all-weather friend. And in the Islamic world, few countries like Turkey, Malaysia, Azerbaijan. Other than that, most of the major countries, they don't back Pakistan, they don't stand with Pakistan. And this is the success of India's coercive diplomacy. So this is a very, very important topic for international relations. The assessment, the analysis that we have done regarding the shift which has happened in West Asia and in the Islamic world towards Pakistan is very important. So please take up a practice question and try to write an answer based on what we have discussed. Now, before I take up the next topic, if you have any doubts, any questions, please let me know. I'll try to take a look if possible. And if time permits, I'll try to answer some of them. So keep posting some of your questions. And depending on the relevance, I'll try to pick up maybe a few. So let's start with the next topic, the next article, the Indus Water Treaty. Of course, I'll not cover the basics. We have covered this multiple times again and again in the last few days. So here we have to understand, can the Indus Water Treaty be suspended unilaterally by India? That's a very important analysis. If you remember, a few days ago, I discussed Indus Water Treaty in detail. I told you that Indus Water Treaty does not have an exit provision. There's no clause, there's no article under the Indus Water Treaty that allows India to exit the Indus Water Treaty. But of course, a country can claim its sovereign right and quit any treaty, but that would affect your international image, right? It would be seen as a violation of your commitments. So, has India suspended the treaty or have we quit the treaty? So, let's understand the nuances and let's look at the legal dimension of this from an international law perspective. Now, what has India said? India has said we are keeping this treaty in abeyance. What do you mean by abeyance? Means we are pausing it. We are pausing our commitments to the Indus Water Treaty. So we have not quit. We have not terminated. Please remember this because I've seen many students getting confused over this because they've been misled by so-called influencers, educators, and your primetime TV channels. We have not quit the treaty. We have not terminated the treaty. India has not terminated or not quit, but we have said we are keeping it in abeyance, meaning we are pausing our commitment to it, which means India will no longer share hydrological data with Pakistan. We will no longer hold the meeting of the Indus Water Commissioners under Permanent Indus Commission and will not be bound by the terms of the treaty on the western rivers, the Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, which was primarily allocated to Pakistan because Pakistan has a greater dependency on it. This treaty, which was signed in 1960 with the mediation of World Bank, was meant to ensure a fair sharing of the water resources between India and Pakistan. See, Pakistan is primarily an agrarian economy, and Pakistan's agriculture has a 80% dependency on the waters of the Indus for irrigation. In fact, 1/3 of its hydropower generation is from the Indus basin. So you can understand how much dependency Pakistan has on the western rivers, the Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. 80% for its irrigation, and 1/3 of its hydropower comes from the Indus rivers. So clearly, these are the lifelines for Pakistan. So given the significance of the western rivers, they were largely allocated to Pakistan, a large share of it, with India being given some limited usage rights. India can have some non-consumptive usage rights of the western rivers, which means we can only build run-of-the-river projects. Run-of-the-river projects are those projects where you don't store the water permanently, where you don't divert the water, you don't divert the course of the river, you just utilize a certain share for irrigation or let's say for hydropower generation, and rest of it you have to allow it freely to flow into Pakistan. So in accordance with the treaty, we have only built few limited projects like Kishan Ganga, Baglihar, the upcoming Ratle hydropower project. All these are run-of-the-river projects from India, which strictly abide with the terms of the Indus Water Treaty. But going forward, will not abide with this. Going forward, in the coming months, in the coming years, we might even alter the design of the existing projects to create storage, to create diversion. We might plan new projects as well to stop the flow of the river itself or to divert it. So this has been India's approach to weaponize the Indus Water Treaty, to use the control we have over the western rivers to punish Pakistan for its sponsorship of terrorism against India. Now, legally, let's see what it means from an international law perspective. As I told you, neither India Pakistan can unilaterally quit the treaty. The treaty does not have a provision to quit. Of course, a country can by exercising its sovereign right, but it will basically undermine your commitment. It will undermine your international image. Tomorrow, other countries will not trust India if we break such treaties. They'll not see India as a reliable partner. So, unilaterally, neither India nor Pakistan can quit Indus Water Treaty because there is no such provision. So, what has India said? We have said we are keeping it in abeyance. We are pausing it. We are stopping our commitments. Now, does this have any validity in international law? Actually, yes. We have something called the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties of 1969, the VCLT, Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, regarding how treaties have to be signed and managed and respected by countries. For that, there is an international convention, the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties of 1969. In this treaty, there is a provision to keep a treaty in suspension. Those countries who have signed a treaty, they can keep it in suspension. This provision is allowed. So when India says we are keeping it in abeyance, it basically means we are suspending our commitment as per the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, the equivalent of that. The other provision is to terminate. Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties recognizes termination. Countries can terminate a treaty, but it has to be done with consent of all the parties involved. Or there should be a provision to exit the treaty. So India right now has not terminated. We have kept it in abeyance, which means we are suspending. So with regard to Vienna Convention on Law of Treaty, we are basically suspending our commitments in the future. Now, if you look at international law in this regard, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, has clearly established that countries which are party to a treaty, they can seek a revision or an upgradation or even suspend a treaty, or they might even quit a treaty if there are some fundamental changes which have taken place. This reminds me of a similar water dispute between Hungary and Slovakia in 1997 over a water sharing and hydropower arrangement. Hungary had filed a case against Slovakia at ICJ, but ICJ dismissed this argument. Hungary had argued that because of political, economic concerns and environmental concerns, that we no longer be able to follow the terms of the treaty, so we want to quit the treaty. So when Hungary raised this matter on political economic grounds, ICJ dismissed the argument, saying that political economic grounds are subjective. That doesn't constitute fundamental change in the circumstances. When you say fundamental changes, it means, let's say, water flow has been affected because of, let's say, climate change due to inadequate rainfall. That is a fundamental change. Then the treaty has to be renegotiated. The older treaty is no longer relevant. Or let's say the countries which had signed the treaty, they no longer exist. Maybe the country has broken apart or new countries have formed. Then fundamental changes have occurred, which means the treaty has to be renegotiated or a new treaty has to be signed. So under international law, so terminating a treaty without basis is not seen as valid. Is that clear? So suspending a treaty is allowed under the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties. As per the VCLT, you can suspend a treaty. You can cite certain specific grounds and suspend your commitments, which is exactly what India has done. And you can invoke Article 62 of the Vienna Convention for this purpose. Because see, this is very important. India is not party to Vienna Convention. Even Pakistan is not party to it. India has never signed Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties. Pakistan has signed it, but it has not ratified it. But ICJ has said whether a country has signed or ratified or not doesn't matter. VCLT, provisions of VCLT is universal. It will apply for everyone. It's binding on everyone because it's part of customary law. It is seen as part of customary law. So India has a right to keep it in suspension. That's what we have done, keeping it in abeyance. But there's no provision for us to terminate it because Indus Water Treaty does not have that provision. But India has been raising a demand from few years. We were requesting Pakistan, we had issued a notice as well to review, renegotiate by citing some fundamental changes which are taking place. Global warming, climate change, which is impacting Himalayan glaciers, is affecting water flow in the Indus Basin. So India wanted a renegotiation, which is a valid environmental ground to renegotiate the treaty. But Pakistan never responded. So now, following the terror attack, we have kept it in abeyance. India has said we might even stop the water flow. India might take some immediate steps. Now, the question is, does India have the capacity to stop the water flow and divert the water flow immediately? The answer is no. Existing infrastructure on the western rivers will not allow India to store water beyond a certain point. But experts are saying that using the existing projects, we can at least regulate and alter the flow of water. So through some jugaad, India can at least in the short term hold, divert and reduce the flow of water into Pakistan. But right now we don't have the required infrastructure. But in the medium to long term, in the next few years, few decades, India can go ahead and plan and build such projects which can store more water, divert the water as well, thus punish Pakistan severely. This will have a detrimental impact on Pakistan either ways. The very fact that India has kept it in abeyance, suspended the commitments, will have a deterrent impact. It has already caused panic in Pakistan because, as I said, Pakistan is an agrarian economy. 80% of its agriculture is dependent on it. 1/3 of its hydropower generation is coming from these waters. So if India were to even store more water using the existing projects or slightly divert the flow and manipulate the flow of water into Pakistan using the current projects which are there, that itself will have a huge impact. So imagine what can happen if India were to plan new projects or redesign the existing projects, increasing the storage capacity. Then Pakistan will feel the devastating impact. The agrarian economy will feel that impact. That is what we need to learn from this important article in today's newspaper. Next, we have another interesting column on natural hydrogen. How can India tap its natural hydrogen potential? That is the focus of this column. Now, what is the application of hydrogen? Hydrogen is seen as a clean fuel. As the world moves to decarbonize the economy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, move away from traditional fossil fuels, hydrogen is seen as a good alternative. So there are many different ways of producing hydrogen. There are a few synthetic, uh, essentially artificial ways of producing hydrogen as well. But natural hydrogen can also be extracted and exploited. So that is what India is looking at today. India has declared that by 2070, we are going to achieve our net zero emissions target. We are going to bring down our emissions, match it with the carbon sequestration, which we are going to achieve, so that in net terms, we'll have zero emissions from the country by 2070. That is India's target. So India has kept its eyes on hydrogen as one of the alternate fuels, apart from solar, wind, nuclear, and other clean, renewable forms of energy. Now, when it comes to natural hydrogen, right now, if you look at the hydrogen demand in the country, if you look at India's energy demand with regard to hydrogen, it is somewhere around 6 million tons per year as of 2020. This is the overall demand, which is very minuscule. Hardly 6 million tons of hydrogen is being consumed in the Indian economy per year as of 2022. But studies have shown, studies led by Niti Aayog, studies led by research institutions have shown that the demand for hydrogen in India's economy is going to surge to more than 50 million tons per year by 2070. This is the exponential increase in demand that we are going to see as we transition towards cleaner fuels, as we move to decarbonize the global economy. And the best part for India is that we are blessed with reserves of natural hydrogen. Recent studies, exploration activities have indicated that India might have potential reserves of up to 3,475 million tons. Means India is blessed with sufficient natural reserves of hydrogen which can be extracted. In fact, that is why this article has been brought out. Recently, India has made a huge discovery in a certain part of the country where hydrogen reserves have been found in lucrative quantities. You know where it has been found? Can anyone tell me in the comments? Any idea where recently India has discovered massive hydrogen reserves? In which part of the country? Can someone answer this? Through a recent exploration activity, India has come across a massive hydrogen reserve which can be economically viable. Kashmir, no. Vishal Gaikwad has answered correctly. It's in Andaman. Please write this down. Make a note of this for your prelims. UPSC might ask you. India has recently discovered massive hydrogen reserves in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. But however, hydrogen exploitation is little challenging. There are many technical challenges involved. See, traditionally, when it comes to any energy exploration and exploitation, the whole industry is focused on traditional crude oil and gas, that is natural gas. So all the technology, the equipment, the refining processes, the industrial processes and equipment, everything is aligned with your traditional fossil fuels or crude oil and gas industry. So developing new technology, developing new equipment, establishing new processes, new refinement technologies, and creating commercial applications for them will take huge investments and a complete shift in the industry itself. So that itself is a big challenge, right? Because we need to find a cost effective way to explore, exploit, utilize hydrogen in the economy. Because see, at the end of the day, hydrogen combustion will only leave behind water vapor. That's why it's a clean fuel compared to traditional fossil fuels. But right now, the entire energy sector and industry is aligned towards crude oil and gas. So, right from exploration to production to its final distribution and application, the whole infrastructure, all the technology, the equipment that we have is aligned towards crude oil and natural gas. Now, this has to be realigned towards alternate fuels like hydrogen. Because see, hydrogen has a very small molecular size. Also, it has very high diffusivity. It is also highly reactive. It reacts with the environment. It is known to corrode metal, cement. So, if you, let's say, try to pass hydrogen through existing gas pipelines or existing refineries, the metal rods, pipes, and cement which is used in the construction will corrode. So, you need to make changes to the existing facilities and infrastructure in order to adopt hydrogen as an alternate fuel. Those technological changes have to come up. And also, you need to focus on safety. Given that hydrogen has high diffusivity and reactivity, can be explosive as well under right conditions. So you need to mitigate the safety risks associated. So there's a need for a lot of research to bring out new technologies, new processes through which we can explore hydrogen and exploit hydrogen safely in a cost effective manner, which is viable financially as well. Because any new investments will increase the cost of energy production, and hydrogen may not be seen as a cheaper fuel, it could become a very costly fuel. So that's why cost effective exploration exploitation is needed, and also safety should be a priority to manage a slightly volatile form of fuel. In this regard, India is collaborating with United States. The US Department of Energy has a research organization called ARPA-E. Some of you might have heard about it. Under the Department of Energy of the US government, there is a research organization called ARPA-E, which is collaborating with India. Because India, US have several agreements in the field of clean energy, from solar to wind, even green hydrogen and natural hydrogen exploration as well. So India, US are working together and collaborating in these technologies to ensure that we can explore and exploit hydrogen in the most efficient manner. Along with that, you can produce hydrogen, as I told you. There are many techniques through which hydrogen can be produced as well. For example, in US, ARPA-E is working on a technology to drill through certain rocks and extract the hydrogen in liquid form. Then there is a carbon sequestration technology where you take dissolved CO2 and infuse the dissolved CO2 into rocks, iron rich rocks, by drilling holes into them. And this process will produce hydrogen in return. So you not only sequester carbon and lock away CO2 for a long time in these iron rich rocks, but you can extract hydrogen, which is a clean alternate fuel. So many such exciting investments are being made in new technologies, new processes, and India, US can be great partners in this regard. So that is why natural hydrogen and its extraction is a very exciting area, and that's something you need to pay attention to, both for prelims and mains. Now let's look at another important article on page number 8. There's an article referring to a big shift that China is making in its foreign policy. So let's understand what China is doing. Why is it adopting a shift in its foreign policy? See, China has gotten into a trade war with the United States, particularly under Donald Trump, who has led the tariff war against China, levied 145% tariffs against Chinese goods. China has retaliated with almost similar tariffs, making trade between US and China almost practically unviable. So, given the impact of the tariff wars and how the Trump administration is trying to target and corner China, a clear attempt is being made by the Trump administration to isolate China in the Indo-Pacific, right? To contain China's growth, China's rise. It's not just the tariff war. There are even export controls which have been placed, which started under the Biden administration to restrict China from accessing sensitive materials and sensitive technologies. For example, advanced NVIDIA GPUs, which are used in AI tools, they are not made available to Chinese companies. In the semiconductor and electronics industry, several key technologies and as well as key materials, including some critical minerals, rare earths, they have been kept off limits for China and Chinese companies by US through its export controls. So clearly, US is not just waging a trade economic war, it's waging a geostrategic war, trying to contain China's rise. So China is now diversifying its foreign policy, trying to create new alliances to shield itself against the American assault. You might remember recently Chinese Premier Xi Jinping, after the tariff war started, He carried out a historic visit to three Southeast Asian countries. Just 2 weeks ago, Xi Jinping visited Vietnam, visited Malaysia, he also visited Cambodia. Now, this has been closely watched by experts, by governments around the world, as it marks a clear focus of China on these countries to rejuvenate its ties with Southeast Asian countries so it can build a parallel power block of itself to counter the American um, containment strategy. Because, see, Vietnam, though it has a standing maritime dispute with China over the Paracel and Spratly group of islands in the South China Sea, Vietnam has dependency on the Chinese economy for investments, for raw materials, for goods. China is a huge market for Vietnamese exports. And don't forget, Vietnam also has been hit by Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. So now it will be natural for US, China and Vietnam to collaborate. That explains why Xi Jinping visited Vietnam. It will help them address the issues they have and collaborate together because China would like to leverage Vietnam's manufacturing potential. And China has already done it. See, today Vietnam is a tech hub, a startup hub, a IT hub, and also a major manufacturing base as well for various goods and commodities. But what is interesting is that most of these industries in Vietnam, they are owned by Chinese companies, Chinese investors. So that in that regard, China has been very smart. It has already diversified its investments, shifted out to those countries where labor is cheaper, raw materials are cheaper. And that's how China has a dominating control over global supply chains. So through this visit, China has sought to build closer ties with Vietnam, address the disputes it has on the other side, keep them aside parallelly, whereas build economic relations to ensure that Chinese and Vietnamese interests can be protected together. Same with Malaysia. Even Malaysia has a dispute with China in South China Sea over the Spratly Group. China, Malaysia, both are party to it. But despite that, China, Malaysia have been getting closer to each other, and China has promised some bigger investments through the Belt and Road Initiative. China has been scaling its Belt and Road investments, and Malaysia is a key partner for China, especially given Malaysia's role in global financial markets. Also, in the services industry, Malaysia is a big player. So China is shoring up its ties with Malaysia. And it also explains why Xi Jinping visited Cambodia. Cambodia is a close ally of China. For many, many years, Cambodia has been a traditional all weather friend. They align ideologically as well. Cambodia is a communist state. Even Vietnam, of course, is a communist state. So China has built closer ties with Cambodia, made some big investments in strategic key projects, from strategic naval bases in Cambodia. Um, for example, in South China Sea near the Gulf of Thailand, right? China has invested in a strategic naval base. It has stepped up its military presence, built a closer manufacturing relations, invested in special economic zones, shifted China's manufacturing to Cambodia as well, partially. So this shift that you're seeing today, right, where China is focusing on these Southeast Asian countries, we're trying to build better economic strategic ties with them. It's a clear attempt from China to counter the American strategy. Because on one hand, US has been using a few Southeast Asian powers like Philippines and others to target China and to contain China. Then US and Japan have been aligned together to contain China's rise in the Indo-Pacific. So this is China's strategy to counter them, to counter US and its allies. And so China is resetting its relations, trying to form better, closer economic ties and strategic ties with Southeast Asian countries. So this standoff which we are seeing in the Indo-Pacific, it could define the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific. And India will be right in the middle, will be caught in this tussle which is going on between US and China. On one hand, we are very closely aligned with the US. The US sees India as a counterbalance to China, right? India has deep concerns about China's aggression and its territorial claims from Himalayan borders to the South China Sea. We do have concerns about Chinese expansionism and aggression. But at the same time, we don't want to become a pawn of the Americans. We don't want to essentially play the American game of containing China. India doesn't want a hostile relationship with China. So this will leave India in a very difficult position. On one hand, we have the Act East policy, through which we are strengthening our ties with East Asian countries. India has a Indo-Pacific doctrine where we have aligned with the Quad countries, with US, Japan, and Australia. So it's a very difficult choice for India and China making these new moves. The recent visits by the Chinese leader to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. It presents a new emerging order in Southeast Asia. It also showcases how influential China is in the region across the Indo Pacific, especially in Southeast Asia. So, this is something you need to be mindful of because these are quickly evolving changes in international relations. Coming to the next big topic, on page 8, we have a very important column related to Private Members Bill. The writers are arguing that Private Members Bill, PMB, is largely an ignored legislative tool in the parliament. So, what is Private Members Bill? Why has it been ignored? What is the need to revive it and how can it be revived? These are the questions we need to answer. So, I'll go beyond the article. I'll take some reference from Indian Express and other articles as well. So, let's understand what is a Private Members Bill. See, in the parliament, in the legislature, it is often the government and the ministers of the government who table the bills. Correct? Bills are drafted by the concerned ministries, which is essentially part of the government, tabled by the respective minister. So these are the government bills. So primarily it is these government bills which are debated. Sufficient time is given for discussion for these government bills. Eventually it is these government bills which are passed. And finally, after the assent of the president, it becomes into law. It turns into a law. Whereas MPs who are not part of the government, whether they are from ruling party or opposition, doesn't matter. MPs, be it from ruling party or from the opposition, who are not ministers, who are not part of the government, they also have a special privilege, a special right to propose a bill. This is called a private member's bill. Understood? So either you have government bill pushed by government ministries, tabled by government ministers, or you have private members bill pushed by MPs in the parliament who either come from the ruling party or the opposition party. These bills which are pushed by individual MPs, each individual MP has the right to push a bill on any issue that they want. So such a bill is called a private member's bill. Now, a private member's bill is also supposed to be discussed, just like a government's bill, debated, and it can be passed by Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. And if president's assent is given, it can turn into a law. Now, my question is, has the parliament ever passed a private member's bill? Have we ever seen in India's independent history a private member's bill becoming a law? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments. Has ever a private member's bill become a law in the country? Has it been passed by both the houses and received the assent of the president? Yes or no? Now, of late, there is a big concern that this important tool of legislation has been ignored, it has been sidelined. Many of you are saying, yes, very good. 14 times private members bill has become law since independence. But since 1970, not a single private members bill has received the assent of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So it's been more than 50 years since the last private members bill became a law. But post independence, 14 private member bills have turned into law, meaning they were passed by both Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, they received presidential assent and became a law. 14 of them. Since 1970, not a single private member's bill has received assent from both Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. Either it's been passed by Lok Sabha or only by Rajya Sabha. Eventually, it would have lapsed. So that is why the writers feel that it is a very ignored tool of lawmaking, an ignored tool of legislation. Because see, private MPs, that is individual MPs, be it from ruling party or opposition, if they can bring out important issues, try to push a law on important critical matters, this is good for a parliamentary democracy, right? Because this is a unique opportunity for MPs to move away from their party line, to move away from their party ideology and take an individual initiative for the sake of their constituency, for the sake of the nation, on some pressing matters. For example, recently we have seen a bill being pushed by a MP pushing for right to disconnect, where employees need not be in touch with their employer after the working hours to protect the balance between work and personal life. Bills have been pushed related to women's health, women's education. Bills have been pushed to bring accountability to our intelligence agencies like RAW and IB, which are not answerable to the parliament. So many such key issues which are of national importance, public importance, which are relevant to the people of the country, to the constituency, they can be pushed by individual MPs, which parties may not do. The party in power may never do that. But an individual MP can go out of the party line and the party's ideology and push an individual bill and bring out a legislation. It's not that our MPs are lazy and they're not pushing any bills. In each Lok Sabha, hundreds and hundreds of private members' bill is brought up. I'll give you an example. In just the 17th Lok Sabha, in the previous Lok Sabha, more than 700 private members' bills each were pushed in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So total of 1,400 plus. You know how many were discussed in the parliament? Only two were taken up for discussion, that too hardly for 10 minutes in Lok Sabha. Only 14 were discussed in Rajya Sabha. None of them were passed. In the current 18th Lok Sabha, already 64 private member bills have been introduced. Not one has been taken up for discussion. So what's the procedure over here? Be it in Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, what is the procedure to discuss private members' bill, to accept them and to consider them for discussion and debate? See, Fridays are dedicated for private member bill tabling and discussion. Fridays, some time can be given by the chair, by the speaker, by the chairman, respectively of Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. They can give some time on every Friday to take up private member bill and discuss that, and to even have a vote if necessary to see whether it should be passed or not. But most Fridays, usually the sessions are basically cancelled early. They are adjourned. They're adjourned very early after completing some legislative business without leaving any time for taking up discussions on private members' bill. If at all some time is given, it's hardly 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? The individual MP will just present their argument and it is simply dismissed after that. This has been the case. And also, there is an institutional constraint as well. The 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act that introduced anti-defection law under the 10th schedule, it has forced MPs to toe the party line, to follow the party whip, not only with regard to voting in the parliament on the floor of the house, but even with regard to party's ideology. So individual MPs feel constrained. They fear that if they go away from the party's ideology and line and propose a bill, they might be essentially pushed out by invoking the provisions of defection under the anti-defection law. So this has become a constraint on individual MPs. It has restricted the creativity, the initiative of MPs to be separate and distinct from their parties. So this has become a big disservice. And as a result, private member bills are largely, they go under the radar. They don't even make it to newspaper headlines. It's very rare for such a bill to hit headlines. Several MPs have drafted some beautiful bills. Shashi Tharoor, Kanimoi, and Supriya Sule, many others. They have tried to bring out these individual bills. None of them have received sufficient support, even though they concern some important related issues and important agendas which are crucial for the nation. So, what can be done to give some more priority for private members' bill? See, in British Parliament, there is a practice in the UK Parliament. There is a fixed time which cannot be compromised for discussing private members' bill. Individual MPs are given 10 minutes of time to present their bill, and another MP can oppose them for 10 minutes. So good 20 to 30 minutes of time is allocated. And this is mandatory. If a private member bill is accepted for discussion in the UK Parliament, the MP who's pushing for it can give a speech up to 10 minutes and initiate a debate which can further lead to a bigger discussion, and an opposition MP can counter it for another 10 minutes. So creating a time space of at least 20 to 30 minutes of discussion on the floor of the House. So this is enshrined in the rules of the business of the House, which is not present currently in India. Though Fridays, some time has to be given, it's not mandatory. So the speaker, the chairman, they don't see private member bill to be so important. They don't allocate much time to it. And also, don't forget how acrimonious our parliamentarians become, where opposition is simply disrupting government's business. Government doesn't care about initiating a healthy debate and ignores the opposition and bulldozes laws. So, as a result, it has destroyed the space available for such initiatives, which can be led by individual MPs. So, what can be done? So, the option is allocate a dedicated time. Right now, Fridays, private members' bill can be taken up, but the time is not clearly specified. So, in the rules of the Lok Sabha, rules of the Rajya Sabha, it can be clearly specified that 15 minutes would be dedicated, 30 minutes would be dedicated for private members' bill. And it should be a mandatory enforcement. It should not be a discretionary option given to the speaker and the chairman. It should be mandatory, treated as sacrosanct, that every Friday we will take up maybe one or two private members' bill. And a time slot has to be fixed for that. And to ensure that only legitimate bills are taken up for consideration, because not every MP will draft a good bill. There could be several MPs with their own hidden agendas, vested interests, who will simply try to push bill after bill. So obviously, Parliament doesn't have the time to take up hundreds of bills for discussion, right? So there can be a committee, a very independent, neutral review committee in the Parliament, which will review these bills before they are considered for discussion in the Parliament. So they can filter out the useless bills and pick out maybe the few good ones and push it for discussion in the Parliament. The high impact bills can be brought up for discussion. See, at the end of the day, whether it's passed or not doesn't matter. The discussion which can happen on the floor will bring focus on an agenda. It will bring national attention to important issues of social importance, economic and national importance. That is the relevance of a private member's bill. So I hope this is clear for everyone. Now let's take up the last big topic and then we'll move towards the prelim section. US and Ukraine have finally signed the minerals deal which was proposed few months ago. I'm sure you remember the shouting match between US President Donald Trump, Vice President JD Vance, and Ukrainian leader Zelensky that took place at the Oval Office in the White House. Trump has said, why should US provide free military aid to Ukraine worth billions of dollars? He's always said US will recover the investments made, and he has kept eyes of the US administration on the minerals and the critical natural resources of Ukraine, be it the rare earth minerals of Ukraine, critical minerals, and even oil gas reserves of Ukraine and the agricultural resources of Ukraine. This is something US has eyed to get hold of in exchange for military aid. So this deal, which was proposed some time ago, has been signed between the two countries. US and Ukraine are setting up a reinvestment fund, the United States Ukraine Reinvestment Fund, through which the revenue generated through these Ukrainian resources will be channeled into this reinvestment fund and it will be controlled by the US. Essentially, it will give US government and by extension American companies to have control over Ukrainian natural resources, from rare earth minerals to critical minerals to agricultural resources to oil and gas. All these Ukrainian wealth will now be accessible to US in return for military aid which is being provided. The peace deal that Trump has proposed is nowhere near in sight. Russia has not backed down, it has not agreed for a ceasefire, and it's reported that Trump is unhappy with Putin and how Russia is approaching the war, because Russia has even scaled up the conflict in some places. So clearly the US appears to be losing options. So the war might drag, might continue for some more time. So meanwhile, Ukrainians want military aid. Without American military support, Ukraine will fall. Right? So Ukraine has agreed for this trade off where Ukraine will pay for the weapons through its natural wealth and resources by giving up some of the wealth generated through its rare earth minerals, critical minerals, oil, gas, and agriculture. And through this reinvestment fund, the US government and American companies will eventually get access to Ukraine's mineral wealth and natural resources. That is something you need to note down. This deal has been finalized and a reinvestment fund, which will be managed by the US, is going to be set up. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look at the smaller articles in today's paper. The Waves Summit was held in Mumbai. with the support of the government of India and India's industry. It's one of the most high profile events to have been held in India with the backing of the government. The WAVE Summit, the World Audio Visual Entertainment Summit 2025, is of great significance. It focuses on audio visual entertainment. Essentially, content creation is the focus of the WAVES Summit. Today's economy, at least since the last decade, has been a content driven economy, not just in India, but around the world, thanks to social media platforms. So, this part of the economy is often referred to as the orange economy, where individual creators with their own individuality, their creativity, their own intellectual property can bring out content which has economic value and which can be monetized. This part of the economy is called the orange economy. It's defined by the United Nations as well. So please write down. UPSC might ask you, what is orange economy? It refers to the content based economy where individual creators, through their own talent, through their individual creativity, through their intellectual property, which could be their copyrights over music, over scripts, they are creating content which has economic value, which can be monetized. And that is what you mean by orange economy. Is that clear? So don't think it's related to growing oranges. Don't think it's related to orange revolution, the orange, the fruit. No, it's not. It's related to the creator economy. Orange economy refers to the creator economy, not just content creation, creation of anything by an individual. There are many startups where one or few individuals create a new product. That is also part of orange economy. So a creator economy where individuals create something. It could be audio content, visual content. It could be a product which is developed, right? So through their own individual creativity and intellectual property, if individuals are creating content of economic value or goods of economic value, that is called orange economy. That's the whole purpose of Waves Summit as well, to promote audio visual entertainment, which includes online gaming, social media content, animation, AI based content, etc., and use that for various economic purposes. So India has said, Prime Minister Modi, who attended the summit, has said that India has great potential to become a hub of orange economy. PM Modi has several times interacted with content creators, influencers, individual creators across industries, across segments. So PM Modi believes that India has tremendous potential to become a hub of orange economy. Next, PM Modi visited Kerala. Near Trivandrum, there is a strategic port, a transshipment facility which India has recently built, which has been fully inaugurated. This is nothing but the Vizhinjam Port, which is going to be very, very crucial for the Indian economy. So, where is it located? The port of Trivandrum or the port of Vizhinjam, on the outskirts of Trivandrum on the west coast of India, in Kerala. That's where it is located. It is not just an ordinary port, it's a transshipment facility. What do you mean by transshipment facility? It means goods coming from one country headed towards another country, right? Sometimes they'll have to be taken from one container ship and loaded to another container ship, or goods going across multiple countries. They'll have to be diverted. So such logistic support will be available at a transshipment facility. So today in the world, there are few major transshipment facilities. For example, Dubai, then Singapore, even Colombo for that matter, in our neighboring country, Sri Lanka. The transshipment facilities at Dubai, Colombo, Singapore, they are considered to be one of the most world renowned transshipment facilities. They're known for their superior logistics, superior state of the art infrastructure. So most of the goods passing through the Indo-Pacific pass through Dubai, Colombo, Singapore route. Lot of India's trade, India's imports, exports, right? They get transshipped either from Colombo or Singapore or Dubai. Right now, we have a dependency on these ports. Indian trade is dependent on the transshipment facilities present at Colombo, Dubai, and Singapore. And this could be a strategic disadvantage as well. Especially hostile countries like China could misuse this. Why do you think China has invested at Colombo port? Because it's a major global transshipment hub. A lot of India's trade passes through Colombo. And given that Chinese companies control the terminals, it's always a strategic weak point for India. So that is why India wanted to create its own transshipment facility. And Vizhinjam is the perfect, ideal strategic location for that. Because there is a natural harbor available here with sufficient depth. It's a deep harbor which is available where a easy port facility can be created. India has set up the right infrastructure with state of the art facilities. Even large container ships can dock. They can be loaded, unloaded within minutes. So such an advanced transshipment facility has been set up, and India aims to make this a container hub, a transshipment hub for this entire region of the Indian Ocean. So this not only has great economic significance, it has a lot of strategic significance as well. Because of our dependency on foreign ports like Colombo, Singapore, Dubai, we are losing 200 to 250 million dollars every year because you have to pay a fee for them. Indian traders for importing, exporting through these ports, they have to end up paying a fee, a service fee for these port facilities. So this revenue loss can be saved. Plus, it will reduce our dependency, our external dependency, and it will make India more self-reliant. Please note down the location of this transshipment facility. Next, on page 9, there's an article that pays tribute to the Vietnam War. Now, why are we discussing Vietnam War? 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of the end of Vietnam War. Vietnam War ended in 1975. For those of you who don't know, Vietnam, which you see today, which is one country, it was split between the North and the South during the Cold War. Vietnam was split on ideological lines. North Vietnam, under the Viet Cong, aligned with the Soviet Union, with other communist powers from China, North Korea, but primarily with the USSR. South Vietnam aligned with democratic forces, primarily US and Europe, creating a split. And the conflict which broke out between them, the civil war, turned into a bigger conflict with the invasion of the US. US invaded Vietnam in an unnecessary war, where US not only brought troops and weapons, but it ended up bombing the country repeatedly and backing the South Vietnamese forces. US committed brutal atrocities against the communist Vietnamese in the north. This brutal war dragged for more than a decade. Eventually, US lost the conflict. US retreated, exited, and finally, it was the communists who won the war. They reunified the country, they defeated South Vietnam, and that is how the current communist state of Vietnam was born. Today, Vietnam is a communist state, a single party state, but it's a flourishing economy today. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's a technology hub, a IT startup hub, and it has already graduated to the upper middle income level. That's why UPSC had asked a prelims question a couple of years ago based on Vietnam's political structure and economy. There was a very specific prelims question which was given. This reminds me, the war itself reminds me of a legendary movie by Satyajit Ray. I'm sure you have heard about Satyajit Ray, India's legendary filmmaker. His movie, Pratidwandi. I don't know if you guys have seen it. If you haven't, you should. A beautiful movie where the protagonist goes for an interview. In the interview, he's asked, what was the most significant event of the last decade? This movie came out in 1960s, 70s. So, in the movie, the protagonist is asked by the interviewer, like, what was the biggest event of the last decade? So, everyone would be expecting that he will say that placing humans on the moon, essentially the American lunar mission, where astronauts landed on the lunar surface, that was seen as the biggest event, and they were expecting the protagonist to give that answer. The protagonist says Vietnam War was the biggest event of the decade. So when asked about it, why do you think Vietnam War is the biggest event? Are you a communist? He says, no, I'm not a communist. I need not be a communist, but I appreciate the grit, the resilience of the Vietnamese, the willpower of the Vietnamese, because the communist Vietnamese from the north defeated the mighty superpower because they managed to bring collectivism together. They worked collectively as a group. Using rudimentary methods, they dug tunnels. If you've ever been to Vietnam, you will get to witness the tunnel network created by the Viet Cong. More than 250 kilometers of tunnels were built underground so that the Viet Cong guerrillas, militias could hide and save themselves from American bombing and in turn retaliate and counter both South Vietnamese forces and the American forces. Just by using rudimentary shovels and baskets, they managed to dug up huge amounts of earth material. They built a three-storied tunnel structure with three stories with sufficient ventilation and masking the smoke and camouflaging themselves. So this was pure genius from a war perspective, from a tactic perspective. And that's what is depicted in the movie as well. The protagonist says, I appreciate the resilience of the Vietnamese. I appreciate their willpower, their collectiveness, the will to fight against external interference. So this article pays tribute to that. So I think one should be aware of this past, this history from Cold War, the war in Vietnam, how Vietnamese fought, and US was accused of dropping the napalm bombs containing Agent Orange or nerve gas, which today is a prohibited chemical weapon. Right? US was accused of committing brutal violations and atrocities as well. Eventually, Vietnam stood strong. The people of Vietnam, the communist forces, won the conflict, and today Vietnam is a flourishing country under a single party communist state. So you need to be aware of the politics of another country, especially because Vietnam is a key partner of India as well. We have very close economic and strategic relations and defense relations with Vietnam. Next, the US has notified the potential sale of maritime surveillance technology to India worth $131 million. So US is going to supply some key softwares and services related to radar technology, maritime surveillance radars, which are crucial to track shipping and the movement of ships in the Indo-Pacific. So this defense deal is part of Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative. Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness. Can abbreviate this as IPMDA. This initiative was launched by the Quad Group at the 2022 Tokyo Summit. Please make a note. The Quad Group of countries established this initiative to focus on maritime domain awareness. What do you mean by maritime domain awareness? It's about keeping an eye on the movement of vessels and ships in the seas and the oceans. Because when it comes to shipping, there are two types. You have white shipping and dark shipping. White shipping refers to commercial shipping where the ships report their location. Every ship, every vessel will have a transponder, will have a communication equipment installed. They share their location, their registration details, what the goods they are carrying. They have all the required documents. So this is a legal form of shipping, which is tracked and monitored. But those vessels and boats which evade documentation, which turn off their beacons, which turn off their transponders, which don't report their location or mask their actual identity, which try to conceal the goods they're carrying, that is called dark shipping. So this could involve drug trafficking. This could involve boats which are trying to evade sanctions. Let's say Iran is under sanctions. So let's say Iran can't export oil directly. It will use ships of other countries or other jurisdictions to smuggle oil from Iran in a different name. So evading sanctions or engaging in criminal activity, be it drug trafficking, arms trafficking, smuggling, or let's say transferring of weapons for a state actor, for a non-state actor. All these illicit, illegal forms of shipping falls under dark shipping. So the Quad countries are focused on tracking dark shipping. And for this purpose, they launched this initiative called Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness. It was announced at the Tokyo Summit of the Quad countries in 2022. So India, US, Japan, and Australia are part of it. They're assisting each other to track dark shipping across the Indo-Pacific region. Yeah. And to improve our surveillance, India is seeking some softwares, some specific radar technology, and few technologies, defense technologies, which helps in maritime surveillance. And US is ready to sell that to India. So the US Defense Security Cooperation Agency has notified the sale, the foreign military sale of this equipment to India worth $131 million under the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative. So this is what you need to know from today's newspaper. 11 important articles, right? Especially 7 big articles which required a detailed analysis. And I hope we have done justice to today's newspaper. I know it's been a lengthy discussion, but trust me, today's newspaper deserved a lengthy, detailed discussion. So I hope you've understood everything. And if you're happy with the discussion and if you understood every topic, do let me know in the comments. Press the like button and don't forget to share the video with other aspirants. So let's see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.